Well, hello, my name's Louise Savage. Welcome to my channel on this extremely sunny day. So I apologise if I've got these ghostly hands going on and things like that, but I really don't want to shut the sun out too much. So anyway, welcome to Louise Savage Muses if you are returning, and welcome also if this is the first time you've heard me waffle on at length. Anyway, I have my wonderful bookshelves behind me. We are still on A. I can't quite believe it, but there we are. And I think last time I left off with Isabelle Allende, who I really, really love as an author. I love all that magical realism and the sort of South American history and folklore and just wonderful sort of, I just love her fireside storytelling mood that she creates. So anyway, I'll just grab a few. I'm going to keep turning as I did last time I did this. I'm not dancing or doing a workout or anything, although I am enjoying the sunshine, but I need to go and grab the books off my shelves. So I've got three here. Oh gosh, that sunshine, I'm not going to complain about it, but I'm going to only talk about two of them, I think. So the first one is a novel called Daughter of Fortune, or yes, Daughter, not Daughters. And I really, really vividly remember reading this a long time ago now. And I loved it because it was set in the 1800s in the American gold rush. And it was something that I didn't really know about, or at least not very much about. And then there was a whole host of novels that came out that kind of covered that same period in history. But I particularly love this one because typical of Allende, you know, the character, what's she called, Eliza, I think. She travels from, she's found, I think, in a soap crate as a baby and left on some English brother and sister's doorstep. But anyway, and that happens in Chile. And then she goes from Chile to Hong Kong. There's a story that's all wrapped up with gambling, and she meets a very, very firm friend there. And then off to the gold rush in California. So, you know, and eventually I think ends up in San Francisco. And the thing I really loved about this is that she really gave you a sense of the scale of the gold rush, how many thousands and thousands and thousands of people headed off to that part of America at the time, and the conditions they were living in and the opportunism and so on. So I really recommend it. It's a rip-roaring, I would describe it as an adventure story actually. It's a really rip-roaring adventure with some very colourful characters and, you know, really memorable. The other one of Allende's that I'd love to mention is Paula. Now, this is weird. I've just realised this is on the wrong shelf because these are my fiction books behind me. And I've obviously bunged it up there because it's Allende, but actually this book is a memoir. Paula was Isabelle Allende's daughter who died as an adult in the I think about 92. And Isabelle Allende began writing this as a letter to her daughter whilst her daughter was in a coma in hospital. She suffered from porphyria, and this was one of the complications of it. And sadly, very sadly, her daughter never emerged from that coma. And this is just a beautiful letter to her daughter, love letter, but also it covers Allende's own sort of biography as well. So it dips into the past when she was writing the first of her novels and so on. And just a really interesting take on grief and grieving and how you cope with that kind of scenario. So I really highly recommend this as an interesting, thoughtful, but very emotional read. What else have we got? Well, we have up here, next up, there's a bit of dust coming off these. I don't know if you can see this. This is Kinflicks by Alther. And it's got a very, very sort of racy cover, which if the sunlight will let me, you can probably now see. And I remember reading this a long time ago. I think it was written in the 70s, but it's about the experiences of women in the 50s and 60s. And the lead character, I think she's called Ginny, and she is the story opens with her returning to her hometown in America, and her mum is seriously ill. So it's quite a sort of bleak opening to the story. But anyway, what Ginny does is she sort of experiences all the possible, what's the word? Roles? That's not quite right. She's a mother, she's a daughter, she's a wife, but equally she experiments with all sorts of different types of relationship. And she sort of, it's very, very racy. I might have said that already. I think it was, it was really popular at the time because of that, because it was exploring sexuality in a way that was very unusual for the time. She has various sexual encounters. She tends to kind of adopt the behaviour of those around her in a way that I think is really well observed, actually. I think a lot of young people are influenced in that way. It's funny, but it's also really moving. And I didn't realise that this is now a Virago modern classic, and I would say rightly so. I haven't reread it since I read it donkeys years ago, and maybe it's about time I did. Now, also loitering on my shelves, and I really don't know why, is 2 novels by Kingsley Amis. I don't really know why I've kept these, because I just find that kind of, oh dear, that era of male, what's the word? Just almost misogynistic. Maybe it is misogynistic. Very often literature about the lives of the educated and so on. It just seems very stale, male and pale to me nowadays. I've got no desire to go back and read these, so I think maybe at some point I will get rid of them. Perhaps I've kept them because they belong to my mum. Next up, 4 novels by Nicolo Amaniti, who is an absolute favourite of mine. Sorry, I'm really having to juggle this light. It's not great, is it? Really love his novels. All 4 of these I would recommend, but particularly I think I started with I'm Not Scared, which is a really gruesome tale about a child who finds this other trapped child. Oh, it's just, oh, even talking about it now makes me seethe. And it's about the way a sort of group of mafiosi have teamed up against this one child in the village, and it's all told through a child's perspective. Anna is a kind of real sort of dystopian story about a young girl whose parents have died, and she's approaching puberty, and she knows that the whole of Sicily has been wiped out by this terrible disease, and it only matures in somebody when they reach puberty. So she knows she's not got long to live, and she has a little brother to look after. And bizarrely, we actually were visiting this part of Sicily when we visited this part of Sicily not long before I read the book, so it was really fascinating to be able to picture the landscape that the novel was set in. The Crossroads is probably my favourite of Amaniti's that I've read so far, and again it sort of follows the story of this. It's really violent, very disturbing novel, but it looks into mob and gang culture in a way that I don't think I've read before. So, I think he's a very interesting, really interesting Italian novelist. And then what have we got? We have Gin Patrol on the Purple Line, which was shortlisted, or maybe, was it shortlisted or longlisted? I can't quite remember, for the Women's Prize for Fiction some years ago. And I loved this. Again, it's a child's eye view of life in the slums in India. And this young lad becomes a detective, and he's just got such a beautiful sort of innocent but not voice, so I really did enjoy that. Then we have now Book of Clouds. That's not something I ever see in the bookshop, I don't think, this one. Book of Clouds. It's by Chloe Arijdis. I don't know if I've pronounced her name properly. I apologise, Chloe. This is a story that is told from the point of view of a Mexican traveller, and she is in Berlin, and she's on a train or the subway, and she's sitting there, and opposite her she sees this old woman, and she's absolutely convinced that it's Hitler in disguise. And this is after the fall of the Berlin Wall. So if you've never been to Berlin, or you're a fan of Berlin, I really recommend this novel. I think it was her debut. I don't know if she's written anything since. I ought to find out. But the character in it, to my show, Tatiana it might be, she paces the streets of Berlin and goes to the Holocaust Memorial and loads of the sort of famous landmarks, and really enjoys. No, she doesn't enjoy, but it's quite a sort of, again, it's got Gothic overtones. It's beautifully written. And the relationships in it, there aren't many. She's quite an isolated character, but they're very interesting. But it's just kind of a novel that's trying to make sense, I think, of the Berlin Wall and what if Hitler is still around. And, you know, it's quite creepy. The weather plays a really significant part. There's storms and there's fogs, and it's got a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde feel to it. So, yeah, I don't know how well known this novel is, but I know I really enjoy it. It's stayed with me, hasn't it? Lovely Simon Armitage. I'm really enjoying his series on the radio at the moment, where he goes to his shed and interviews poets and various people. I recommend, he did one with Ian McKellen, which I think is really, really worth a listen if you haven't heard it yet. I think you can find it on BBC Sounds or BBC iPlayer possibly. I don't remember an awful lot about this. I know it was a very pleasant read, and it gave me an insight into Armitage. Maybe it was the first time that I really sort of started to warm to him as a human being, apart from through his poetry. So yeah, it's autobiographical, and I can't say more because I can't remember much more about it. Sorry, Simon. What else do we have? Oh, The Wonderful, Wonderful Flames by Robbie Arnott. Again, that lovely sun's come out. I feel like I'm dancing around the sun. I'm sorry, everyone. But again, a novel that I read last year and absolutely adored. I've got a couple of his other ones waiting to be read. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. And again, this is set in, is he New Zealand or Australian? That's terrible. I think he's Australian. Yeah, Australian. And it's a story of the sort of what's the word? The way that interplay between the past and the present, and the beliefs of the indigenous peoples, and how that kind of filters through into contemporary society. There's a real dilemma in this book between two relatives, and some some scenes that stay with you forever. Really powerful. Here I have my copies of 4 of Maya Angelou's books, starting with, of course, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which I only read initially because a friend of mine gave it to me as a present when I was at university, and I hadn't heard of it. I'm just wondering, I would have written in, yeah, 1989, there we are. That's when I was given this book, and I was just blown away by beautiful, rich, wonderful storytelling, but also, of course, you know, Maya Angelou's, the fact that it was autobiographical, the fact that she, I mean, you know, she's known for her poetry, she's known for these books, but she was also a singer, an actor, and, you know, her life story was quite traumatic. I love listening to interviews with Maya Angelou. And if you haven't got round to these books yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. They are amazing. Okay. Then we have a lovely, again, that lovely sunshine. Simon will be telling me off. He really, really gets annoyed when I get the lighting wrong, and I'm really sorry, but it's either this or I don't do it, because maybe I need to go to some classes. Anyway, this is called What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky by Leslie and Kurt Arima. It won the Commonwealth Short Story competition or whatever prize. And again, really, really entertaining. There are some really uplifting stories in here and also some deeply shocking ones. And, you know, I have real on-off relationship with I can't say it, short story collections. But I did really enjoy this one. Then we have a whole host of Nadim Aslam novels. Now, again, if you've watched my channel, you'll know that I'm a massive fan. He's a writer with Pakistani background and writes beautifully, I think, about that part of the world, but also the impact that it has. You know, the first novel I read of his was Maps for Lost Lovers, which I just think is a beautiful title. And part of this is actually set, I think it's Bradford, in the north of England. So it's not, you know, he isn't just writing about Pakistan. He writes about the influence on other parts of the world too. Then we have 6 Kate Atkinsons, and I'm not going to go into those because I did a whole video about her not so long ago. So if you want to know what I think of Kate Atkinson, please go to that video. I think A God in Ruins would be a really good starting point if you've not read anything of hers. Or if you're into detective fiction, read her Case Histories, which is the first of her series featuring Jackson Brodie. I absolutely adore them. And finally, for the A's, we get on to Margaret Atwood. And I suspect when I get onto the next shelf next week, which will be A and into B next month, you'll see that there's a lot of Atwood on my shelves. You know, for many, many years, she was my absolutely favourite writer. Wasn't a massive fan of The Handmaid's Tale, to be honest. It was more novels like Alias Grace. Now, if you haven't read any Atwood, or you haven't read Alias Grace, you've got a real treat in store. And I love the fact that Atwood has written some quite chunky novels. You know, we seem to, I've banged on about this before. I get a bit fed up of reading books that are around about 300-page mark. You know, we need developed, more epic storytelling as well to be coming out of our authors, I feel. But anyway, Alias Grace is a wonderful psychological exploration, I would say. I think Atwood based it on a true life murder story. It was a man and his housekeeper were murdered in the 1840s, and a woman called Grace and another guy were convicted, and they were the servants who lived in the house. So in some ways the obvious kind of target. And they were convicted of the murder. The guy was hung and Grace was given life imprisonment. And the novel is an exploration of, there's a group of Methodists who feel that it's time for Grace to be integrated back into society a little bit. They want to allow her to serve in a household and sort of participate in society a bit more. And they, I don't know whether they employ him or they manage to get hold of this doctor who they want to interview Grace. And that's what the novel is about. It's him conducting this series of interviews to decide whether she really is a cold-hearted killer or whether it was a moment of madness or possession or whatever you want to call it. So it's a really interesting investigation of attitudes towards women at the time, but also, you know, a wonderful psychological exploration. And no, I'm not going to say it because it would spoil the experience if you haven't read it before. I've also got some of Atwood's short stories here. Wilderness Tips is one of them. And again, I'm not a fan. I love her novels, but there are very few of her short stories that I've really enjoyed. Maybe I need to go back to them because it's a long time since I read them, but it's such a weird art form, the short story. When it's done well, it's brilliant. But even Margaret Atwood, I think, struggles to pull it off. Anyway, there we go. We are still on A. We are on Atwood. We reached Alias Grace. And by the way, I wasn't a massive fan of The Handmaid's Tale, but I really loved the sequel. And that might be controversial. Maybe I'll leave it with that little thought. I enjoyed The Testaments a lot. Anyway, take care, everybody. sorry about the brightness and the slightly ghost-like hand, and hope I haven't dazzled you. Anyway, see you soon. Take care. Bye.